to show you how to use the Basics panel and the HSL panel to edit color. Let's start off with this color TV sign that is no longer there, that I photographed on Sepulveda Boulevard in Mar Vista. One thing that really kind of irritates me about this image is the skewed perspective, so I'm just going to quickly fix that before we get started, and using the transform tool. Now let's look at what we have available in the Basics panel, which is kind of the first default panel that comes up in Camera Raw. A lot I can do here. First, let's look at the histogram, study the histogram, which is a graphic display of our exposure. And it shows me that my exposure is pretty correct. I also have my clipping warnings on, my highlight clipping and shadow clipping warnings, so that I can see whether or not I'm clipping any detail at either end of my histogram, which I'm not. So in other words, I have a pretty good exposure here. One thing that with color that will happen is as you go towards underexposure, it does tend to saturate the color a little bit. So I could bring that down maybe a tenth of a stop to saturate the color a little bit. A more effective way might be to use the saturation tool here, but that tends to be very overused. And one thing that happens when you do use this slider is that you tend to get carried away, and it's a very overused tool. Sometimes a subtle use of this is acceptable, and that doesn't look half bad, but I think there's a better way to do it. First of all, let's think about this image. This image is a picture of a faded sign about color in color, which is kind of ironic in a way because we think of color as being vivid. And so I might just want to leave it alone to retain that irony. But if I do want to make the picture a little bit more colorful, I need to use my HSL adjustments. What are these? Hue, saturation, and luminance. So let's look at these separately. Let's just pick one color. Let's say red. As I move the red slider, you can see with luminance, it's making my my red lighter and darker. Double click on that, it goes back to normal. If I switch to saturation, it's making the red more saturated and the red completely unsaturated. And that's beautiful because I can work with just one color at a time rather than all of them. I can even change the hue of that color somewhat. I can make it almost purple. So the question is, what do I want? Well, I think what I want is maybe to make that red a little bit more saturated. So I'm going to use my targeted adjustment tool, click on saturation, and hold that over just specifically that color. Now you see it's also affecting the orange a little bit. So I'm able to get that just where I want it to be. Also, I'm thinking maybe my yellow is a little bit too light, so I can go to Luminance and I can bring that down a little bit. Isn't that lovely? So I can work directly with the slider, or I can work with the targeted adjustment tool. I think maybe that light blue up here might be nice a little bit. Oops, I used the wrong tool. I used luminance. I want saturation. A little bit more saturated. There we go, just subtle. Okay, so now I've done some subtle adjustments to my color that haven't affected everything, and it doesn't look tacky. Okay, so that's a good quick way of using the HSL adjustment tool. Let me show you how that works with a different image. Let's see, what would be a good one? Let's try the bonsai garden, which I shot in Zurich, Switzerland on somewhat of a overcast day, and it's slightly overexposed. So what I want to do is start off by in the Basics panel, bringing that down a little bit. You can see the red up here is indicating that there's no detail there. So I'm going to bring my highlights down and fix that. Now I'm ready to get started on the color. This is an image where I think overall, because it was a very cloudy day, pretty much all the color in the picture could benefit from a little bit of saturation. So I'm going to bring that up slightly using my saturation tool here. Okay. Got to be careful not to overdo it. Now I can go to my HSL adjustment tool and I can work with specific colors. For example, I think that brick is a little bit light. So what I want to do is use my targeted adjustment tool to maybe, excuse me, I was on the wrong tool. Now I'm on Luminance and I'll bring that down, make that a little darker. Nice. Maybe this purple is a little bit odd. Let's see what it looks like a different color. I have all these choices now that I didn't have before. And of course, if I don't like the result, I can go Command Z and undo it. Actually, purple is kind of the opposite on the chromatic star from orange. So I think it works good purple. But I think the purple is maybe a little bit light. So I'm going to bring it down a little bit. That's a little bit nicer. So you can see maybe my greens could be a little bit more vivid. So I will bring up the greens a little bit. And now you can see a quick before and after by hitting the P key. In just a few minutes, I've improved that picture considerably. Okay, maybe I'd take more time on this one, but that gives you a general idea of what you can do with these amazing tools. Okay, let's take a look at one more image. This picture of a clock, actually not a clock, it's a thermometer that I photographed in New York. It looks like it's overexposed, but it's actually not. If you look at the histogram, it is, most of the information is right in the middle where it needs to be, but it's very low contrast. So let's start off by adjusting the contrast. It will also affect the color and make it more vivid. So I'm going to set the black point until I start to see a little blue. Okay, about there. And then I'm going to set the white point. Too far. Okay, back off a little bit. That looks pretty good. Maybe back off a little on the black. Already much better. Again, I'm thinking, those horizontal lines are bothering me. Let's fix that. Okay. All right, now let's go to the HSL tool and see what else we can do. The background has a little bit of color in it, which it's a very subtle color. If I want to remove a lot of that color from the background, I can use my targeted adjustment tool, go to saturation, just simply drag that to the left. And most of the color from the background is now removed. And what I could then do is I could work with just the color of the clock, rather the thermometer. As you can see, it was a very hot day. So let's go again to the saturation tool and work with just the yellow. I can increase that or decrease that, get it to just where I want it to be. In this case, I want this to be a very subtle color, a very ambient kind of color. So I'm going to go there. As you can see, you can use these tools to increase or decrease the saturation of your image. And I hope this made a little sense.